Members will recall prior to the adjournment, I indicated I was going to give a ruling in relation to the effect of the debate on the 12th amendment on the next amendment listed for debate, namely the 78th amendment. If Amendment 12 is adopted, the effect will be that the field in question is no longer zoned for affordable housing. In those circumstances, my ruling is that Amendment 78 may be debated, but only as to parts B, C and D of the proposition, as A will have just been adopted by the Assembly. If Amendment 12 is rejected, and the effect of which is that the field remains zoned for affordable housing, then Amendment 78 may also be debated, but must be voted on as a whole, as it would offend Standing Order 20 to vote on Part A separately. So whatever the outcome of this debate, members will be able to debate Amendment 78. Does any other member wish to speak on the current amendment, the 12th amendment? In that case, I call upon the Connétable to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I understand that following your ruling, Deputy Aye, who spoke first, is now able to support this amendment, which means I can spare him the things I'd written down to say about what he said. It's actually very good, because what it means is that if this field is spared development and we can move on to his amendment, we can of course hope to achieve full accessibility of the new affordable homes that are being built around the island, which I must say I thought was happening anyway. I thought that in this day and age we were building fully accessible homes, and I thought we had been for some time, but I will absolutely get behind his amendment when we get to it. We also heard from Deputy Gardner, who mentioned our deputies' meetings, and it is true that we meet every month. It's true that not all of the 10 deputies come, and it's true that I'm not always aware of their plans. I like to think that I keep the deputies fully abreast of what I'm thinking about, and certainly the Roads Committee, which, as I've said before, meets in open session, is very clear about what it believes is the right thing for the parish. And as I said in my opening remarks, the Roads Committee was fully supportive of keeping this field free from development. The Environment Minister made, I thought, an interesting speech, and we may perhaps have been talking at cross purposes, because I wasn't suggesting that, well, we were just discussing whether this development is sustainable or not. He said that it is sustainable because, of course, it's on a good bus route and it's next to a school and so on. I would still argue that building on the outskirts of a large town is unsustainable, because you're essentially consigning residents of these homes to car dependency. Even if there is a bus service, there will be ample provision for parking, ample opportunity for car use. However, he went on to say that I espouse the view that people can live in flats and don't need cars. And actually, as I will be explaining when we get to the parking policy of this plan, that's absolutely not what I believe. I think that St Helier residents do have as much right to enjoy the benefits of car ownership as everybody else in the island. and that's why I will continue to fight for adequate parking facilities for town residents. That was the main point I think that was raised. And as I said, my point about his assistant minister, I didn't mean to criticise him personally. I was simply raising the problem that we have as a small island. If we continue to lead people to believe that their aspiration in terms of car ownership, in terms of home ownership, should be for a 4-bedroomed house with front and back gardens in the countryside, because we can't go on doing that forever. And that's why it is so important that we commend the benefits and pleasures of town living. And of course that brings me back to the fact that if you live in town, you shouldn't feel you're going to have to give up your rather nice car. I was going to finish, sir, just by reading a quotation from an email I received coincidentally just a couple of days ago about this field. And it's a subject that has been raised by other members in speaking about the fields they're trying to save. But this person who wrote to me about their concern, and I quote, about the possible threat to a large mature oak tree on the edge of field H1219, immediately adjacent to the Green Lane. For this and other reasons in general, I'd contest the inspector's view that field H1219 has no exceptional ecological value. I've personally picked elderflowers and blackberries from shrubs at the field edge. As I'm sure you know, both of these plant species sustain large insect populations, which in turn support bird life. The oak tree, of course, fulfills these functions too and provides essential canopy protection for both insect and bird populations, as well as being as an important sequestrator of carbon and countering pollution from emissions. The destruction of such a large, mature tree, quite unusual in Jersey and very unusual in St Helier, would in my view be an outright tragedy, as well as being contrary to the state's expressed position on climate change and on preservation of biodiversity in the island. I would like to see everything possible being done to preserve this tree, even, perhaps especially, if it does turn out that the field is to be lost for development. So I would argue, sir, that this field, as well as being important for agriculture, as well as being important for the future of Hope Valley School, is also important ecologically, particularly the hedgerow and the trees alongside it. Sir, in concluding, I've indicated already my shift away from an absolute refusal to support building on green fields where they occur in parish centres. And as I support my fellow constables in their wish to build in their centres, I hope that my fellow constables, if no one else in the Assembly, will support my wish and the wish of the Roads Committee and the wish of St Helier parishioners, not to see the boundaries of St Helier pushed out further into the countryside. And I would argue that if there's one field in the whole list that we are looking at today and next week that deserves the clemency of this Assembly, it is field 1219. I maintain the proposition, sir.
Is the appel called for? Thank you. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber.
So I'm afraid I've done it again. You can start calling me Deputy Alves if you like. Well, I haven't voted on mine though. Should I do that, or do you want to swap it?
What is greffier?
I'll vote on both.
It's best if you vote in your. It's best if you vote in your own seat. It's best if you vote in your own seat, Deputy Talia. Oh, good, thank you.
You go away for 2 years, sir, and then come back, and then somebody's.
Oh, apparently, if you press the abstention vote for Deputy Alves, that would be a good thing as well. Thank you. All members the opportunity of casting their votes. And I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 19 votes for, 18 votes contre. Yes?
Those voting for in the chamber, Senator Mezek, the Connétables of St Helier, St Lawrence, Grouville, St Peter and St Martin, Deputies Southern, Lewis, Tadier, St Mary, Morale, Lehegara, Ayer, Ward and Gardner. And in the chat, voting for the Connétable of St Saviour, the Connétable of St Brelard, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Martin, and that's it. And then those voting contre in the chamber, Senator Moore, Deputies Pinnell, St Martin, St Bouan, Young, Guida, and in the chat, the Connétable of St Bouan, the Deputy of St John, the Connétable of St John, Deputy Wickenden, Senator Gorst, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Ash, Deputy Labby, the Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy of Trinity, and Senator Ferguson.
Now move to the 78th amendment lodged by Deputy Ayer, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment but not Part A of the amendment.
After the words "the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25," insert the words "except that B, within policy H6, after the first paragraph, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. The following site should be specifically zoned for the provision of purpose-built, fully accessible homes for people with disabilities, and its development for any other use will not be supported. Field H1219, La Grande Route de Montalabé, St Helier, 1.2 hectares, 6.6 Vosges. C. The Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of B. And D. The Draft Bridging Island Plan Proposals Map Part A, Planning Zones, should be amended to reflect the adoption of B.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. We can now address my amendment to enable H1219 to be used for the provision of purpose-built, fully accessible homes for people with disabilities. In the Comptroller and Auditor General's latest review, the percentage of Jersey adults living in residential care settings was found to be considerably higher than that of England. The review stated that the majority of long-term care scheme claimants are in residential settings, with occupancy levels in Jersey being significantly higher than comparative data for England. This is clearly outlined in Exhibit 14, which demonstrates that the average number of occupied residential and nursing beds in Jersey is more than 3.5 times higher than in England. This seems to indicate that we are disproportionately dependent on residential care homes, which are extremely expensive to fund, and that a new direction needs to be taken. This is one of the primary reasons why I have brought this amendment. Included in the report, at paragraph 79,
the Comptroller and Auditor General states that individual health and social care professionals are usually responsible for sourcing appropriate care settings. She explains that they do so, and here I quote, on the basis of the best information available to them at the time. However, in the absence of any data reporting obligations for care homes, we have no way of knowing how many residential care providers might already be approaching full capacity. So whilst individuals remain theoretically free to choose their own care setting, their choice might be, in reality, quite limited. This lack of availability will in itself increase the costs of such care over time, and it is reasonable to assert that a new approach is needed if we are to limit any further increases to long-term care contributions. I believe that building more homes for people with disabilities is not only the right thing to do from a social perspective, but that it will inevitably save the island money in the long term. There are other aspects to this scheme which would be of benefit. For example, we must consider those who assist with domiciliary care, such as family nursing and home care staff, who do an excellent job, but who currently spend a great deal of their own time driving around the island from parish to parish. If 40 or so of the homes they had to visit were in the same area, it would make their jobs that bit easier. The domiciliary care market remains underdeveloped on the island following an historic emphasis on residential care provision. We can draw a comparison with the Office for National Statistics in England, which indicates that 66% of care needs are delivered in the home. In Jersey, the figure is 33% of long-term care benefit cases. This is a statistic that needs to be corrected, and I hope that this amendment is the first of many such developments in this direction. In the Minister's comments paper, he states that the housing needs of persons with disabilities needs to be better understood and prioritised where needs arise. I believe that there is a clear need and that we should address this now by ensuring that we allocate Field H1219 to people with disabilities. So I make the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does the member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy of St Mary, then Deputy Ward. Deputy St Mary.
Thanks, sir. And I'm grateful to Deputy IA for bringing this proposition, which opens up an area which I had not previously considered. Certainly, we do need to make, as a priority, provision of homes for those with disabilities of various kinds. The one aspect which troubles me somewhat is it right that these should all be in one particular area? All people, disabled or otherwise, are part of our general community, and I am concerned that they should be restricted to one area when they should be enjoying the neighbourliness of those who are fully able-bodied. And that's my strong reservation. I would ask, my general question is therefore as to whether in the general application of providing affordable housing, regard is had by the various departments, whether that's environment, health, social security, to the needs of the disabled, and whether that can actually be built into the equation without having to allocate a specific site. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I follow the previous deputy, and I would say, yes, it just sounds like a very good idea, and there's certainly a need. The positioning near Montalabe School seems to be a good idea. I think as an island, we've moved towards a more inclusive society, and that's a very good thing. And I think that what we do need to have are regulations that, as a matter of course, include disability access for anyone who will be living there for now and for into the future. and have some genuine consideration of the needs of people who maybe have physical challenges that are specific to them. And disabilities are only that if society puts obstacles in the way for many. Housing is one of those issues. So I think my only concern here is about the creation of areas of living that are specifically for that. And I would like to have seen a much wider inclusion of these building regulations across housing that will be built into the future, in particular affordable housing. And it would be interesting to know how this fits into the affordable housing plan. I believe it doesn't now, but it would be specifically created for this purpose, which is a good idea in many ways. But this is a difficult one because is it the right thing to do into the future, and will this create more estates specifically for disabilities, and do we want that to be an exclusive, excluding, if you like, of people, or do we want to have a society where we all understand much more about what it is to be a person because we realise of our differences as much as our similarities? That's a really important thing to me. I know my experience of schools that are inclusive of disabilities is extraordinarily good for children because they see that difference does not mean that people aren't exactly the same in that sort of strange juxtaposition of words. So I think it's just a consideration I think we should have, and I wonder if the Deputy could address that as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And today it's going to be a pleasure to follow Deputy Ward because I think he's nearly there. Do we actually need this? What we don't need, sir, is a small village for disabled people. We have Andium, who since 2010 at least are building completely adaptable flats and homes. You have all the light sockets are wheelchair accessible, they're very low. The majority have a wet room. Some may even have a sort of, they call them a 1.5 bedrooms. They do charge for 2 bedrooms, but they call them 1.5. So the person, if they get a disability, they've got the wet room, a small studded wall in between that can be taken down. So you've got the bedroom and the bathroom. And then if you did need a carer to sleep over, you've got the small half a bedroom if necessary. And there's hundreds all over the place. Why would we put some 40-something homes for disabilities? Now, again, there's so many disabilities. You would have to be building them or definitely refurbishing to actually what the person needs. Sometimes as a person gets older, there's all different things that, that'd be fine when they're 9 or 10, when they're 14, 15, they need another. So you need something that, works, but also if, lots of people are not born with a disability, something happens, they have an accident, it goes back to, where was you brought up? Where's your family? Where are your friends? Oh, we can't get you one there. We've got a nice little house for you up there because that's where all the disabled people live, but you can't stay in your community. And especially for youngsters as well. Youngsters like to play out in their communities. Just been watching the Disability Olympics. I mean, people do fantastic things now with disabilities. I think the Deputy is trying to do something good. I didn't like the comment, it's easier than if you visit all the people in one area. No, disability is supposed to be inclusive, and we're not going to get it with this. I do understand at the moment we're not achieving the right split of people being able to stay in their homes with a disability. Majority of that is, have we got the workers? There are issues, but this is not going to solve that. I'm very against this for so many reasons. I think the sentiment was good, but no, I just really can't support it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think the Deputy's amendment has caused me to, I think, have quite a rethink on this. And I think my starting point is that the Deputy's proposition now proposes to earmark a specific site under Policy H6. And Policy H6, I think it's worth reading. I was reading it through, and there's quite a few words in there which really help, I think, which point towards the sort of facility it is and what the elements of it are. And then I think that would help members make a judgment on whether or not the approach being proposed on this site is correct. But the policy is called supported housing. And it says, new housing, that's all of it, must meet the diverse, specialised needs of people with disabilities, those requiring some degree of care and vulnerable people, in order to ensure equal access to housing and social outcomes. And then they say these are best provided in those part of the island's built-up area with best access and proximity to local services, facilities and public transport, or where people are best able to remain connected to their existing support network of family and friends. So I think that's clearly an issue for where, for spatially relating. Then it says, it talks about then the move that Jersey is making from the Jersey care towards the Jersey care model, which moves away from the unsustainable institutional model of care into a modern community-based structure. And of course, the deputies in his proposition did correctly refer to the very high degree of occupation that we currently have in our care homes, which are generally, I think they're generally occupied by older persons, but they're not exclusively so. There are people in care homes with all sorts of supported needs. And I think the figures that I was really quite shocked to find out, the occupancy, I was told, was about 99%. And so we have very little flexibility in that. And so then it talks about extra care is a principle that can be applied to a broad range of housing, which typically offers self-contained living space with access to communal facilities. There's an interesting element. So, that flagged up a question in my mind. Could you put a communal type of facility within such a development if you did it? Or to provide some sort of support. And the ethos is about providing an enabling environment, which I think is, and then it says, now although a lot of the policy is aimed at persons of my age and above, it does recognise that supported housing can embrace the needs of other sectors of the community outside of elderly islanders. But then it goes on, and this is obviously true, it is difficult to identify and predict the precise demand for other forms of supported housing. And therefore, so in general, of course, it says this should be provided within the built-up area and so on. And of course, when you read the policy is very short. And when you read Policy H6, it's pretty narrow. Basically, it says, well, we won't support this unless. What I think Deputy Ayer's proposition is doing is offering us saying, let's have an example of where we might do this, maybe as an opportunity. And I would be very surprised if anybody can, at the moment, predict exactly what that development would look like, how it would be structured, and so on. I see that as a downstream task. But if this proposition is approved, of course, this will effectively be in the island plan, and therefore, any negatives that come out of H6 as drafted will not apply. And of course, I've also heard what was said, that what Connie Tarb said, and I think early on and other members have said, well, we should. I'm told at the moment the arguments I was asked, or at least recommended to go with, is that the island's building bylaws, which date from 2007, should be meaning that all homes constructed since that time enable occupants with disabilities to cope better with increased mobility. And therefore, all new homes that we built should be compatible with supported living. But of course, my guess is that the vast majority of homes in the island where people are don't meet the 2007 building regs. I'd be very surprised if they do. New homes do, but existing ones. And of course, what I see in the policy as drafted before it's amended by Deputy Ayer is, well, we can improve existing buildings to make them better and so on, which is good, but this goes the extra mile. So I think, sir, I think that does give me grounds to rethink the position. I think the officer's advice to me is right, that we should be doing this anyway on every other site, but here we are offered something which maybe, in my mind, helps us take a step in the island plan towards a more proactive position in this question of how we provide supporting houses for different groups. So that's the way I'm seeing it at the moment, and I personally would have thought a field which is bang on the edge of the area. If we are to lose that field, this seems to be a very positive argument for doing so. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Tellier.
Thank you, sir. It's on the face of it, it's compelling because I think there's nobody in the Assembly who wants to be seen to be voting against disabled people, as is maybe what's being suggested here. The questions I would ask, though, are a few of the following. First of all, I think about future-proofing, and I think about whether, in fact, we're setting up, maybe unintentionally, well-intentioned, at the same time, we've got a false dichotomy in the sense that we're saying this is an area where disabled people can live, and these are areas where people without disabilities live. And what we need to be moving towards, I think, and this is why I mentioned future-proofing, is that you shouldn't have homes that are for disabled people and homes that are for ordinarily able people, if we call them that, because people transition throughout their lives. And so you might have a temporary or a more permanent disability as you get older following an incident, an accident, or just ordinary old age creeping in, which requires you to make amendments. And so the appearance of rooms, either as wet rooms or which can suitably take wheelchair access because the doors are wide enough, because there are ramps in place, etc., that should be hardwired into our planning process, into new builds, wherever we build them. Because I've certainly seen so many times in my casework over the years where people have applied for housing, not because they don't have anywhere to live, but because often the private rental that they have, and so I'm obviously talking from a Le Kennevet St. Brelard perspective, something's happened and they say, look, we need ground floor access, or we need at least lift access, and we can only get it realistically in social housing in Andium. And of course they apply for that, and there's a waiting list, and then they're told, but you're going to have to, in all likelihood, move out of the parish and into St. Helier. And they accept that, but it's not their first point of call. And I'm concerned that this is going to happen again, that we might unintentionally create a ghetto, which I'm sure is not the intention of Deputy Ayer, and he can probably address that. And the other point is that I'm just worried that this isn't the right location for it. I mean, disability, as we know, can mean so many things. I'm just putting myself in somebody else's shoes. I can imagine, for example, if I were wheelchair bound or needed to use a mobility scooter, where would I want to live? Would you want to live at the top of a hill at Queen's Road, tucked away by a secondary school? And I've looked at the map, but I know the area fairly well anyway. And what are you going to do? You're going to go out in your mobility scooter, go around some of the tight bends there. You're going to do your shopping at Morrison's, at the little corner shop. Are you going to have to go down Queen's Road, which is permanently gridlocked and busy, if you want to get into town? If you drive, you may not drive, of course, if you want to be self-sufficient, or do you go slightly up the hill? And where do you go if you go in the other direction? Where are your nearest shops? Are you going to go all the way up to the Co-op at Zion almost, where there's that new development? I'm not sure if this has been properly thought out or how it's going to work. Have disabled rights groups been consulted in all of this? Is it something that they want? And I think the other point is we want mixed neighbourhoods, so that you shouldn't just simply say, okay, this is where the disabled people live in St Helier. In fact, in a lot of the other parishes who don't have enough housing, we'll put them there as well. They can apply for that. I just think there are quite a few alarm bells for me, but certainly the sentiment is right here. What's been flagged up here by the CNAG and others about we don't want to be shutting people away, forcing them into care settings when they don't need to be there. And I do think of a family in St Brelard, in fact, who's in a very strange situation. They're multi-generational, and they're having to rent in the private sector. They're quite happy to do that. And in fact, they were putting an advert out saying, we'd like to find a private landlord who's willing for us to make adaptations to their house so that I can live there with my mother, my partner, and our child. And you're thinking you're going to have a really tough job. Luckily, they've also applied for housing through the Gateway. They'll probably have a lot more luck with the application through the Gateway to be able to live there, because it was said to them, why don't you just put your mother in a home and then you can apply to live somewhere on your own in the Gateway. You probably qualify in your own right, or indeed your mother might qualify in her own right for some assisted housing through Andium. But they're saying, no, we want to all live together. We want to be able to, my partner doesn't work. Her job is to be at home, and she will look after the mother and our own child. And you want to make things easy for people. So I think it's the right thing to do in that sense. But I think it needs a lot more thought as to what kind of communities we're potentially creating here and where we put them. And that's a job, and I think a challenge, a gauntlet that the Deputy has laid down for this government, but of course for future governments to pick up.
Thank you, Deputy. Dr. Morell.
Thank you, sir. I think it's fair to say one of the main reasons I supported the Constable's preceding proposition was so that I could also support this proposition, or this amendment, I should say. And I've listened to the arguments, and most of them so far, I have to admit, kind of riled me a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of us talking from a position of ignorance and pretending we know what we're talking about. I mean, I'll just take Deputy Tadier's there about ghettoisation, which I think is something I mentioned about over 55s living. And yet, we voted through yesterday a patch of land in St John's precisely for over 55s sheltered housing. Ghettoisation that Deputy Tadier is so strongly against. I've heard people speaking about disabilities as though disability means you're in a mobility scooter and you can't walk very far, when actually disability means so much more than that. Disability doesn't just have to be a physical disability, it could be a learning and developmental disability as well. For some people, disability means that they can operate out of relatively ordinary housing in mixed communities quite happily. For other people, disability means that living in ordinary housing in mixed communities is actually really difficult. For some people, disability means that they receive abuse from other people in the community, and that living somewhere where they feel that they are amongst others who perhaps understand them a little more provides them with security. And I think that's, and please, Deputy Ayer, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's part of what this is about. Enabling people to have an independence of living in a community which can support them and provide them with security. it is interesting. I was reading about assisted living communities and research about them in Ireland. And it is fascinating because the range, disability is a really poor word. It's that simple. Disability is a shockingly bad word because it means so much that this one word cannot possibly cover everything that it means. In Ireland, in the research I was reading, it's people saying, I want to go out, I want to mix with people, but I'm not allowed to. Even though I'm an adult, my parents who are caring for me won't let me because they're too worried about me. I want to live on my own, but again, I can't because we don't have the facilities to enable that. I don't want to live with my parents anymore. I'm a 25-year-old adult and I want to be out in the community living by myself, but until we have somewhere where my parents feel that they can enable me to live or allow me to live, I have to stay living with my parents. These are the sorts of responses that I was reading in this Irish research. And it really did make me think about how we discuss this. And it is really difficult. There's no easy way, don't get me wrong. But because of the word disability, it feels like we're trying to class everyone into this one idea that perhaps each of us individually has about disabilities. I was really, really lucky. As a youngster, I went to Belroyal School in St. Lawrence. It had only been open, it was opened, I think, the year after I was born. So it was a really new school when I started in the reception class there. And it's absolutely correct that one of the beauties of going to Belroyal School was that I was being taught amongst children with all sorts of challenges, which I was fortunate not to share those challenges. We had people who had developmental challenges in terms of learning. We had people with physical challenges. And as a result of that, I hope and I feel like I've grown up much more able to just see people as people, regardless of what challenge they may face. And I think Belroyal was amazing for that. And this was in the 1970s, so it was a long time ago. It wasn't all unenlightened back in those days. But there's also a reality that, as well as Belroyal School, we also had to maintain Montalabé School, which was much more specialised on people who face different challenges. And that's because not everyone could go to Belroyal School. Not everyone could mix in that way. It just wasn't possible for everyone as well. And I think we need to listen to those people who know a little bit more about this than us. And I do believe that the proposer here does know a little bit more about this than I do. And when he says this would be a very useful facility in Jersey, I really believe he speaks from a position of an experience that I don't have. But I have a little experience through Belroyal School, etc. But I'm blessed, I'm lucky, I don't suffer from all these challenges. And so I just think that rather than us saying, no, it's not convenient right now, no, it's ghettoization, no, it's not how I think of disability, it's not how I imagine disability should be dealt with. I think perhaps we just need to listen and think to ourselves, actually, perhaps my idea of disability isn't actually doesn't encompass what disability means. And that this actually is a really good idea, which will help people live more independent lives, but in a secure and sheltered way that enables them to do so safely and with confidence. Because at the end of the day, that's probably what most people want, just the confidence to be able to operate within our community and being able to go to a home that enables them to live either fully independently or assisted, but something they can call their home, and in which they can mix with other people who perhaps understand them better than I would or you would. Maybe a really good thing and quite a step forward for Jersey. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Sorry, sir, can I raise a point of order?
Yes.
So I've been considering your ruling on this matter, and it does seem to me that what we're effectively doing is debating the same matter, which will fall foul of Standing Order 20. We've effectively debated not developing field 1219, and we're now having a debate about developing it. Perhaps you could advise.
Well, I consider that point specifically in my ruling, and we are not considering paragraph A, but B, C, and D. My ruling remains the same.
But so we're still debating the development of the field that we just voted on a few minutes ago.
Yeah, but for a different purpose. The overall debate, in my judgment, is sufficiently different in its extent, so as to not fall foul of that standing order. Yes, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And one important thing that I agree with previous speaker, Deputy Morale, that we need to know what people think. And I was very disturbed before we gone into the break, and as you all know, I brought 4 amendments about to address and to raise awareness about disabilities. And I'm grateful for Deputy Aya to bring in this amendment, which caught me a bit unprepared, because I think we do need to discuss it, and it's really, really important debate. But what I did during the lunch break, I reached out to people from different disability groups to understand their views, because I cannot decide for them what is good for them, because I don't know, I don't experience it. And I cannot tell that I know 100%, because most of the people responded to me, we haven't been consulted, we don't know. And the people who works with disability group, it is important point to debate. And if I would probably caught a bit earlier, and I apologize in advance that I didn't bring an amendment. One of the things that people raised with me, they said, actually, it's a really good idea, but we would like to have a percentage of the development. Can you bring an amendment that it will be a percentage of the field, like from 40 houses, 20 will be, and 20 others, to have a mix? And I said, no, I cannot bring any amendment now. This is what we have in front of us. But it has been raised that preference globally is the percentage of, and I was emailed, of developments are accessible, not all disabled people in one area. Certainly will be something that people feel strongly about and would like to be involved. People with disabilities having a say in there where they live and what they look like, rather than people talking how they need to live. Interesting, it was raised with me also that there are young generations in their 20s that are looking for the community feeling, and they will embrace this type of development, maybe not 100%, but some of it, to have this community feeling, to relate, to understand each other. And there are less young generation that would like to have families and the children don't want to be seen, especially from that estate that it's only disabled only estate. Again, I wouldn't think about it, but it was raised with me and showed me the difference in the age. Deputy completely right raised in his report, and Minister addressed it, its bylaws. Specific examples that have been given around doorways. Currently acceptable standards in Jersey are below best modern practice and guidance. And the same with as an average chair without space for your hands on the wheels and of a manual chair, or space for larger electric chair, or for any other devices that people use. So different medical equipment. So it is really important that our bylaws will comply with the modern standards, and this is one of the changes that has to be made. Something else was raised with me, it's about the transport. Apparently it was engaged with Liberty Buses how many wheelchairs can go on the bus, and if, for example, we have people going at 9 a.m. from the same place to town and using bus, and we'll have 5 people who would like to go on the bus with the wheelchair to get to the same time, it is a challenge. Again, I wouldn't think about it if somebody wouldn't raise with me. Apparently, it has been a change. It's much more needs to be discussed and sought to make sure that future homes being considered are actually going to be right for people and inclusive. Deputy Moreau raised important point. It's not just really the wheelchairs. There are so many different types of disabilities, and I put it in my report that needs to be addressed. And I'm sure that states members remember event from late 2021 when David Blunkett spoke about it, that needs and how disabled people don't have all same needs, but often people think of ramps and accessible toilets. But again, we need to understand. My question to the proposer, with which disabled groups he was consulted, any research, I mean, I could see what's it in the report, but it's more than this, I think needs to be done. It's important that we'll do it, and it's important because we're having several new developments that we are approving, and I would encourage Minister to include this percentage. I wish I would bring an amendment, but he didn't. And I think great that needs are being considered. Disabled people need to be part of this discussion about what they need, how they want, and and we need to continue to work with have a disability strategy group, inclusion group, I'm not sure. So it's something, it's important to discuss, but I feel we need to look into all possible angles before we are making blank decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. I want to start by thanking the Deputy for bringing such a thought-provoking amendment to the proceedings. I think with anybody who's listening who lives with a disability or cares for a disability will be grateful that we are discussing them during this long Island Plan debate. From my experience from working with the charities who would support people either with a sudden disability through a head injury or a brain injury, it is absolutely life-changing. I've seen families have to completely change their way of life and dig into all sorts of savings accounts and borrow money with the goodwill of some great charities and also government support to provide the home that they need so they can keep their loved one at home with the family. And it is where I want to focus my point, is on the carers. Anybody who knows people who cares for anybody with a severe disability, a physical disability, that demands 24-hour care, it is an extraordinary feat of humanity that loved ones go through to keep their loved ones as close by and do all that they can for their loved one. Sometimes they have to make that difficult decision and find a care home so they can get the best care that they cannot provide. Those moments can be as uplifting that they know that they are going to get the care that they can, but also difficult to leave them behind. Over the generations and over the years, I've come across many people who have had all sorts of experiences in care homes, or people who have needed accommodation to meet their physicality disabilities or their mental disabilities, as Deputy Mayor was quite right to point out. We have come a long way as this island, but we've still got a long way to go. During the last 4 years, some of my constituency cases have been helping people who've had their life changes through disabilities, and their accommodation cannot support them any further. And it's heartbreaking for carers to know the things that they need, they just can't do. And as we all know, with the housing crisis, finding suitable accommodation is not easy. There are waiting lists everywhere, where everywhere looks. But going back to the point of carers, families, loved ones, husbands, wives, who are looking after people with severe physical disabilities, who deserve that care, they themselves need support. And there is something in this amendment that jumps out at me. And that is, whenever I've met or helped people before at my previous works, putting people together with shared experiences can lean on each other like nobody else can. This will not be for everybody. And I think, as Deputy Martin says, we should always strive for equality. But we should also try and provide choice. The mental health and the stress and the strain of anybody caring for anybody with a disability, be that mental or physical, cannot be underestimated. Just imagine what that must be like in an island with a high cost of living, with people not knowing where their jobs are, going through a global pandemic and the uncertainty that faces all of us. Those people face challenges that none of us could even possibly imagine, but some of us do. And the idea that people could live together, support each other, strikes me as something that we could strive for. We're starting to see this change of thinking with things like dementia villages, very popular in places like Norway and Sweden, forward-thinking European countries who are thinking, well, instead of putting our loved ones into homes and places, why don't we create an environment where they have a normal sense of living, where they can see friendly faces, where people can lean on each other's support. There's something in this I think worth striving for. And hearing the Environment Minister, I think he senses it also. Many times this island plan, we get bogged down in the same rhetoric. This just gives us a little moment to step back and think, maybe this is a journey worth pursuing. Let's talk to the people that everybody is referencing. Make sure this is well communicated. Let's go through that journey. And let's provide some people with a choice to create an environment on this island where people can support each other and see each other, not be hidden away anywhere, and give those people the choice as we all strive for better quality. For those carers, the people I meet, I just think this speaks out to them. And that's why I wanted to speak out today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Takes me a moment to get round my keyboard. This is very interesting because when I first joined the States back in 2002, one of the places we went to look round were Terry Lamau's new housing flats on the Albert Quay. And one of the interesting things there was that they had a number of, or a sort of largish flat with a number of bedrooms, and they had set it aside for a group of people with Down syndrome. So in actual fact, we're doing this sort of thing already. You know, it's a bit like what they're planning to do with the hotel that they've just taken over. You know, this isn't a new thing, but it is perhaps worth checking to see how successful it's been. I haven't heard any more about it, so I'm assuming that it's actually been very successful, this business about being able to let them take part in the community, but also, you know, have some sort of care in the community. So perhaps when we're looking at this, Minister, or when the Minister is looking at this, he would like to follow up on this and just see how they're going with their Albert Pier flats. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I guess we're lucky that you did make the ruling you did on this, because it has at least provided us with what's, I think, been a good opportunity to talk about these issues, whichever position you ultimately hold on this amendment. And I've I've listened intently to some of the contributions that have been made. I thought Deputy Gardner and Deputy Morell in particular made some very good points on this. And for what it's worth, the philosophical approach I have on these issues is that I believe that the government should be doing everything it can to create an environment in our community where everybody can meet their potential and thrive, irrespective of their background, and in particular irrespective of what disability they may have. And everybody who does have a disability should be able to thrive in our community, have access to the services that anybody else can benefit from, and have opportunities to achieve and do what they want in life. And when I looked at this amendment for the very first time, I had an inclination towards it because of its clearly good intention. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've moved away from it. And I think that Deputy Ayer has, whilst he's attempted to do something good, I think kind of hasn't really gone far enough with it, and has left us with something that it's not really clear ultimately what it would achieve. Deputy Morell, in his speech, I picked up that he used the word facility a few times to describe what this would be, and in actual fact it wouldn't be a facility from what I can work out in the wording of it and in the report, in that it would be what it says it would be, which is fully accessible homes for people with disabilities. It wouldn't be a centre that provides services that people with disabilities could visit as and when they needed to and receive services. It would simply be where they live. And I think that that does move away from the thinking that we have been moving towards in recent years about inclusive communities, and the aspiration that, in line with that principle of wanting everybody to reach their potential and thrive in their communities, to be able to offer to people with disabilities in Jersey the opportunity to live where they like and have just as good a chance in life as they would anywhere else. And that's good not just for them, but it's also good for the people who they'll live around, because it would be good for us all to live in neighbourhoods where we have people who live a few doors down who might have a disability, and for that to, well, that's just what our communities look like, what our neighbourhoods look like, because everybody's different in them, and we get along with one another, we support one another, irrespective of these things. And this does kind of move away from that, and we haven't really been presented with a case from people with disabilities, the people whose voice ought to be most important in something like this, or from the people who care for people with disabilities, to say that this is a particular thing which is needed, rather than changes to our health system or changes to laws on access and building standards and that sort of thing. There doesn't appear to be a groundswell of grassroots support for this sort of thing. And so I then kind of come back to the same reason, the same point that led me to vote in favour of the Constable of St Heliers amendment previously, that we would still be taking a valuable open green space to build houses on without a clear and demonstrable need for what those houses would really be for, and where that would sit in the rest of the provision that's provided around the island. And I think actually, in trying to create inclusive communities, it really should be the case that we move towards having all homes being fully accessible for people with disabilities, so that if you are in a situation like what Deputy Tadiad described, about somebody who lives happily in a home and then has something happen to them in their life that means they become disabled, which could be a very traumatic thing that happens to them to do that they wouldn't then also have to go through the trauma of leaving their community and leaving their neighbourhood and moving somewhere else and being around people who they don't know, that they could remain in their home and have all the support that they need. And we'll get closer to that point if from this point we are making sure that we future-proof the homes that we do build and that they can be accessible to anyone. And of course, you may not be a disabled person, but want your friends or family who have got disabilities to be able to visit you in your home as well, not have to go to a specific facility or specific site for that. So I just wanted to say that I think that the Deputy is clearly set about with good intentions here, but I think it might on paper look like a bad thing to vote against something that has good intentions, but I think that we can probably do better than this and try to provide support in other more thought through ways with consultation and engagement with the people who would actually be trying to benefit with something like this. And so that all thrown in with the fact that it is still building on a green site, I would urge members to oppose this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy St. One.
Thank you, sir. And I am pleased we're having this debate. I hadn't really expected it, so I've been trying to marshal my thoughts and to calculate how I can respond, because it's very clear that we do need to create homes which provide for the independence of people as they grow more frail or develop disabilities. And we should not rely on an institutional care sector when those people can still be sustained in their own home. And modern homes should do this. And as the Minister said, those built from, 2007, should be built with the building control requirements that would normally allow that to happen. And so I began by approaching this debate by thinking, well, this happens already. You don't need to designate a site, especially for people with disabilities, because we're building homes that would allow for that. But and why should people with disabilities be housed together and not as part of our whole community? So there is that side of it. But thinking it further, sometimes extra facilities are needed in a home to accommodate well a person with disabilities. So, for example, Health and Community Services cares for a number of individuals with severe neurodevelopmental needs. And they live in their own homes, but we provide staff to take care of their needs. So that means that the individual needs all their living space, but in addition, staff, which can be a team, it's usually a team, not just one person, need some space for themselves, and they need some space just to do the routine admin. The homes need to be often have specialised alarm systems or adapted garden areas, and an outside space too, because there's often an adapted vehicle parked at the property, but there's also staff coming and going. So that needs to be something more than just a standard home, if there is such a thing. And that wonderful charitable organisation, Les Amis, have a number of group homes in which they accommodate people with learning disabilities, many of whom love living in community with each other. Those are very successful group homes, but there are not many that are immediately available, because if you take a home that was built certainly before 2007, it would need heavy adaptation in most cases, because those group homes are regulated by the Care Commission. There are all sorts of hoops to jump through, such as corridors need to be a certain width, doorways, all those sort of regulations to be passed as appropriate and safe to operate as a care facility, which is also a home. So it's difficult for Les Amis, I know, to find accommodation like that, which doesn't need considerable adaptation. And then I think it was Deputy Pamplin who has spoken about the concept of dementia villages, which we're beginning to talk about in Jersey. They have been successful, it seems, in some European countries. I think we've got to work out in Jersey whether that is a path we want to take. Some people see disadvantages in it. But we're building a dementia strategy which should help us think through this area. But it may be that this amendment could fit for a dementia village. It's just that more work needs to be done to think this through. I think there's still lots of consideration that is needed, but I thank Deputy IEA for sort of giving this impetus to the thinking. I'd urge him to consult further with the Minister for Social Security, who heads the disability strategy. I'm sorry I hadn't sort of understood the import of this amendment and come to speak with him before, but I'd be very willing to have that discussion. But meanwhile, I think it is worthwhile supporting this amendment, reserving this site for, it's not yet too precise exactly what the need may be, but I discern that there is need there, and it may well be appropriate to allocate a specific site, and therefore, sir, I will be pleased to support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Deputy. Conatable, someone.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, sir, I was pleased to hear the speech from Deputy Pamplin, who always speaks well when he's talking about those people who are disadvantaged in life and who need an extra hand up. And indeed, in St Wands, we, with our homes for the elderly, do our very best to accommodate people who need help in terms of disabilities, and we like to think that we do our best for them. And I think generally as an island, we're not that good about recognising people with disabilities, and having lost 2 parents to dementia, I'm aware that the care that's available is at best patchy, and it's not due to the lack of care from the people who would provide it, but it's just that we're not particularly well coordinated in that respect. So on the face of it, Deputy IEA's proposition has a lot of merit. But I have to say, in my mind, there are 2 bars to me voting for this. Firstly, it's in St Helier, and as I think is generally agreed, St Helier has probably taken as much development as it can cope with. And although I haven't agreed with the Council of St Helier on many things, on this particular point, he and I are as one. And I think the same goes for St Clement and indeed St Saviour's. There is a limit to how much development you can put into any parish whilst preserving the character of that parish. And I think St Helier has really reached the end of that limit. And my final point for not voting for this proposition is of course, the JFU report, which quite clearly says that this field is a last resort and is good for agriculture. Now, we've applied that principle, at least the Assembly has applied that principle when considering other sites. And I suspect this applied to my site in St Wands, where one could equally well argue that there were young people on my list who are perhaps poorly housed with a family who are desperate to get out of their situation and buy a first-time buyer's home. So that they, although it's not a direct comparison, they would equally feel as upset at the loss of potential building sites as those people who are disabled who would like to move into this facility would. So in conclusion, so I feel that whilst the heart says this is a great proposal and should be supported, but this is a planning debate, and from a planning perspective, it doesn't stack up because A, it's in St Helier,
and B, the JFU have made it very plain that this field is good for agriculture. And it's been quite clear from the voting pattern so far that any field that's good for agriculture is not going to be supported by this Assembly. So sadly, I will not be able to support the proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Guy Tarb. Senator Pallett.
Sir, I wasn't intending to speak in this debate, although I have spoken to Deputy Ayer about this issue, and I'm supportive of what he's trying to do. But there are a couple of issues here. Well, the two main issues here. One is the loss of the field and the field to agriculture, and then there's the issue itself that's around providing disabled accommodation. And I really want to speak on the second part of that. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a fairly private person, and I very rarely speak about my family in public. But I'm going to do it today. I'm going to make the one exception in the 10 and a half years I've been in the States. I think I've talked about my dog once, but that's about the only time I've spoke about anything in terms of my private life. There's been a lot of comment around consultation with those that are disabled and those that maybe have experience of caring for a disabled person or maybe having a disability themselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal experience, of which probably very few of members know. But I think it's important in when as I talk about why I believe this is an important amendment and an amendment that needs to be supported. My eldest son was 40 last week, but he was born with a whole range of disabilities, and it was a really frightening experience to go through at the time. One that we both weathered the storm, and we've had two other children as well. But my eldest son, I'm going to name him because I think most people would know Ryan, especially those that have been in the care sector. He was an amazing young child, but had a lot of issues that he had to get over a long course all through his life. But those disabilities not only just affected him, it affected his siblings, and it obviously affected us as parents. There were all sorts of attempts to school him here and look after him here. He attended school in the UK for a short period of time. He went to a Royal National Institute of Blind school in the UK, but it didn't suit him because he missed his family, we missed him. And it was too far to travel on a regular basis, and he came back. And fortunately, from a schooling point of view, we had Montalabo, and Montalabo was a quite incredible place for him to go to school. He made an awful lot of friends. It was a great opportunity to see him engage with and make friends with other people with disabilities, all sorts of disabilities. And when people say there are all sorts of disabilities, there are. Whether it's fortunate or not, but I think it is fortunate. I had the opportunity to go to Great Ormond Street several times, and only when you go to somewhere like Great Ormond Street, you realise how lucky you are and how unfortunate other people are, because there are some quite awful disabilities that young people are born with and have to live the whole of their lives. And trying to find the right place for them is quite often extremely difficult. As time went on, it was becoming clear that Ryan needed the sort of care that it was very difficult for either of us or both of us together to be able to provide. Unfortunately, in this island, we have probably, well, without doubt, the most caring community probably in the British Isles. We have an incredible third sector, And part of that third sector is Les Amis. And Deputy Renner, Deputy Sawan's just mentioned Les Amis, who do an incredible amount of work caring for young people and adults with a range of disabilities. Not only just caring for them, but ensuring that they have a social life, that they have a normal as life as possible. They provide a number, as Deputy Sawan said, they provide a number of facilities, many of which are becoming dated, need investment, and I think it's absolutely incredible that Les Amis are embarked on this journey in buying and refurbishing the Hampshire Hotel to provide accommodation for adults with all sorts of disabilities that will be able to live together, engage together, live in a community together. And if anybody thinks that's the wrong thing to do, then I suggest you go and visit one of Les Amis' homes, residential homes, and you realise what a vibrant place they are, what an enjoyable place they are to live, and how important that contact with others with sometimes with similar disabilities, but not always, how well they get on together and what an enjoyable life they lead. We are going to have to show some support for Les Amis. They're going through a difficult time. That's not for today, and it's not for debate today, but nevertheless, we are going to have to support them at some point, because they provide a service second to none, and we can't afford to lose them in any way, shape or form, and we do need to show our support for them. Moving on to this particular field, a lot of members have said this proposition, this amendment's full of good intentions. It's not full of good intentions, it's full of the right intentions. The right intentions to provide the right type of, hopefully, the right type of accommodation for those that have got a range of disabilities. As I've said, there's nothing wrong with people that have got a range of disabilities living together. In terms of support, it makes it much easier to some degree. We've got, and we will carry on having problems and issues around getting enough care staff to be able to care for those that need it. And it won't be just around disabilities, it will be around dementia and old age and just frailty and all the things that I've got to look forward to in my next 30, hopefully 20 or 30 years if I live that long. But let's not forget those that are in need of accommodation. There is a shortage. Of that I have absolutely no doubt. Members will have to decide whether this is the right site for it, but seeing where it is, I'm quite comfortable that it can accommodate what it says it needs to do. I have a lot of sympathy for the Constable of St Helier and his deputies, because St Helier have taken a brunt of building and continue to over the next assembly and probably onwards after that. But this is the right thing to do. I applaud Deputy IF for bringing this. I apologise for going and talking about my own personal experiences, but it's important that members hear from somebody that has been through the journey. It's been an experience, but we've all come out of it, including Ryan, leading, I think, enjoyable lives. And Ryan is an incredible young man who carries on surprising people, sometimes in the wrong ways, but generally in the right ways. And we need to provide more accommodation for people like Ryan and his friends and others in the community that are going to need care over the decades to come. Care in the community is important. I don't want to play that down, but there are some that are simply too difficult to care for in the community, and it makes much more sense to provide care in a sheltered environment where care can be offered in a much more holistic way and actually in a more efficient way as well. Not that that's the be all and end all, because it's not just about efficiency. It should be about providing the right care. But nevertheless, this is the right thing to do. I implore members to vote for this amendment, because if we can do one thing, let's think of others that are less well off than us, and just for once think about them and do something for them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Higgins. Constable of Sumberlar, was that a point of clarification in relation to the speech made by Senator Pallett?
Yes, sir, it was, if I may, and I just wanted to understand the Senator Pallett, I don't think picked up the point that had been made by previous speakers about the formation of a ghetto, and I wasn't clear in his speech if he'd alluded to that and what his thoughts were on that. Thank you, sir.
Well, not just a point of clarification, that's asking him for an opinion on a matter that he may not have addressed, so I'm not going to allow that point of clarification. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. In the previous amendment, I supported the Constable of St Helier, and the reason why I did was that I felt that we've already got too many houses in this area, and because especially of the impact on traffic on the existing road network, that's going to be exacerbated with the new hospital at Overdale. However, Deputy Ayer's amendment has much to commend it. I feel that we have failed the disabled in the past and their carers. And I'm aware of a number of people with disabilities, including a number of autistic children, who would thrive in this type of accommodation. And I, for one, do not accept that it needs to be a ghetto. It's how it is implemented later and done, but I believe that this location could be an ideal centre to deal with something that is much needed. Now, the use and composition of these units, a mix of disabilities that can be helped in this location, can be looked at later. For those who suggest that we should wait longer is to kick the issue further down the road. Now, we are all within 4 months of an election, and not one of us in the Assembly, with the exception of perhaps the constables, can guarantee they're going to be re-elected. Therefore, let's make a stand for the disabled and approve this proposition now. The exact details of specific provisions can be dealt with by those who are in the Assembly after the election, and all the consultation and engagement with all the various bodies can be done then. This development will not happen overnight. There is time for us to do it. But let's designate this field for this use. Now, for those who've mentioned that they don't want to lose agricultural land, I feel very similarly. I voted actually in this sitting so far to save agricultural land. Now, what I would rather say on this particular issue is I put the less advantaged in our society above land. And I don't care if it's scrubland, agricultural land, or whatever. We have a responsibility to our fellow citizens, especially those who are less advantaged than we are. And I really do believe that we should support Deputy Ayer's proposition, not kick it down the road. Let's get it and agree the site, and all the details can come later. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow the sentiment of...
Do you want to stand up?
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. I'm pleased to follow the Deputy Higgins and applaud his sentiment. And I also applaud Senator Pallett for speaking about his personal experience, which cannot have been easy. The Deputy of St One, who also has experience, spoke very eloquently that there is indeed a need. And something he said reminded me of growing up and my father helping to set up Maison de Lande and taking us to visit when I was at school. This is a specialist accessible hotel for those who, for whatever reason, find it far more accessible than other hotels. This is a different hotel, but it is still inclusive. And this would be a different housing situation, but in its own way would be very inclusive. As we all know, there's so many different types of disability, and some sadly need much more support than others. I see this as growing into a wonderful, supportive community for those who really need it. And I echo very much what Deputy Morrell and Deputy Pamplin said so eloquently. And I'm certain that the proposer, Deputy Ayer, knows so much more about disability than most of us here sitting in this assembly today. And I would really implore people to support Deputy Ayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin Tarb. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Colin Tarb, St Helier.
Yes, thank you, sir. I did have my light on earlier, but I think you missed it.
I saw it and I thought it was in relation to the point of order, so I do apologise.
No, the point of order has been lost. And I'm effectively having to, I'm afraid, bore members with the same speech I made a couple of hours ago. We've heard some wonderful speeches about the need for disabled access, fully accessible accommodation, and as I said in my earlier speech, I thought we had already agreed that. But like so much of what we agreed in the last island plan, it didn't seem to make any difference. But there we are. For the first time in my time in the States, I'm having to effectively fight the same battle twice, which is, well, it's novel, if nothing else. So this is a debate about taking a field out of agriculture. It is not a debate about whether we should create an estate of fully accessible homes. As I said, I'm going to have to make it the same speech I made before. This time, of course, I can include the section I left out before about Deputy Ayer. I was being nice to him. Deputy Ayer is a member of the St Helier Deputy Group, and we meet every month. And we never had any indication that this amendment was going to come through. And as I said, sir, in my first speech, to which I will allude more than once, we have open meetings of the St Helier Roads Committee. The Roads Committee went out last summer and visited this field and were of the view that it shouldn't be developed. And Deputy Ayer was aware of that because I must say he is one of the most frequent attenders of our open meetings of the Roads Committee. And I commend him for that, even though I have to say, sir, that if he continues to attend the Roads Committee, he may not get such a warm welcome as he's had in previous months. That's supposed to be a joke. I'm waiting for a little titter. It is, as I say, sir, I think rather sad that we have not just Deputy Ayer now, but clearly Deputy Higgins as well, is going to go against the Elected Roads Committee and their recommendation that St Helier really has lost enough of its agricultural fields and urban sprawl needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped today. I mentioned earlier that my views about developing green fields have changed. Last time round, I was bitterly opposed to the loss of the field opposite the Trinity pub with its sweeping views down from one of the highest points of the island towards the south coast. And I voted against it, but now I recognise that that field in Trinity is an important part of what makes the village of Trinity work. It supports the shop, it supports the pub, it supports the church, even though I'm not a churchgoer and don't go there very much. I hope members are impressed with my ability to remember what I said before without any notes. I support the parish constable's wish to develop fields in their parish hearts in order to sustain their parishes and keep that parish identity alive. And that's why I've already indicated to my fellow constables that I will be supporting their requests for greenfield development where it is in the heart of the parish. But I won't be supporting them when they are in far-flung areas which remain good agricultural fields. And I hope that may help to bring some of the constables back on my side. So as has been mentioned by many members, and I'm grateful to Senator Pallett, for example, for his sympathy, although sympathy is not going to help the oak tree, which I referred to earlier when I read out from a parishioner's email concerned about the ecological damage that development of this field will create. St Helier is taking the burden of housing for the island, and St Helier is doing that for very good reasons, because it protects the island that St Helier residents hold dear. It protects the countryside, it protects the coastline, it keeps it in good condition for us as townies to visit in the evenings and at weekends. And St Helier, of course, also benefits from people living in town, people choosing to bring up families in town, as I have done, because that is good for town. People are the lifeblood of a growing town. And it means that particularly in the evenings, when in the past we've seen a mass migration out into the countryside, that in the future, as more people choose to live in St Helier, town is going to become a really good place to live at all times of the day and night, and at weekends. And I'm not going to embark on a long description of why I believe that urban dwelling is so important, but clearly it is sustainable. It means that people don't have to use their car for those journeys such as going to work and taking the children to school. And that's why, of course, this field at the top of Queen's Road, and Deputy Tidier made this point very well, it is really unsustainable, because the only way the residents of this housing estate, if it's built, are going to be able to access services is by getting in their car and joining the gridlock on Queen's Road. It is simply not the place to be doing this. I would far rather see an amendment to the island plan. Well, of course, it's in the previous island plan, but we'll pass on that. I'd rather see a commitment by this Assembly that every house that is built as a result of rezoning will be fully accessible for disabled use. Job done. That gives us what we all want. It gives us fully disabled, accessible homes, but it doesn't take away a field that has been marked as an important one for agriculture. It doesn't threaten the ecological value of this field. It doesn't take away a field of strategic importance to Hope Valley School in the future. So I think I've made more or less the same speech as I made before. I don't know if it's any better or any worse. The last debate was only won by one vote, and I realise that's an uphill struggle, but I would urge members to remember that if there is one field on this whole list that they should be protecting, it's the last field in St Helier, field 1219. I urge members to reject the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Tarr. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? I call upon Deputy Iyer to reply. Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. And I thank all members for their participation in the debate. I'll just talk as briefly as possible about some of the comments made. The Deputy of St John's was, the Deputy of St Mary's, I beg your pardon, was concerned about isolation. It is unfortunately easy to be isolated when you're surrounded by able-bodied people, as it is when you are in a site where a lot of other people with other disabilities are situated. And I know there was similar comments from Deputy Ward, but he did mention that there is a need, and that there shouldn't be obstacles put in the way. And he also said that it was a good idea in many ways, but he was concerned about excluding people rather than being inclusive. And I do not believe that that is the objective of this amendment. Indeed, it is to be more inclusive and to give people more opportunity and more choice, which has been mentioned a few times. And of course, people with disabilities may not be excluded if they are still living with their families. And so I would imagine that this site would be allocated to a number of families with children who have disabilities. And as we said, there would be easily accessibility to Montalabé School. Deputy Martin was mentioning about a lot of new properties having wet rooms and such like, and that should be suitable enough for some disabilities, and indeed that is the case. But there are plenty of other people with disabilities who need serious structural rearrangements of those buildings. And so if we were building them from scratch, they would be much more accessible to certain members of our community. And of course, the mention of carers sleeping over and having extra rooms, which would obviously be a necessity. But there may be a possibility of having staff permanently at the site, which would also assist with any need for emergencies. And the proximity to the new hospital would be an advantage as well if, of course, it goes ahead. Although Deputy Marden was very much against this proposal. That the Minister mentioned about supported housing and that there is little flexibility in residential care homes, which is true, and then they are 90% full, which is true, but again, we have too many people in care homes, and that needs to be changed. And obviously, people may well cope better in these new homes than if they were built. He also mentioned existing buildings being adapted, but if you try to widen doors, widen corridors, install hoists in lifts, and various other factors, it becomes a very expensive task, and often one that cannot be achieved. Deputy Tadyer mentioned, oh yes, when old age creeping in. Obviously, this would not be solely for the elderly. In fact, I was presuming more that it would be for young people with families, or, as was mentioned by another member, that it would be for young people who are disabled but want to leave their home to live independently. And he was also concerned about there being the wrong site, but unfortunately there are no centre town availability for building a site in the middle of town close to all other amenities. He was concerned about consultation with disability groups. Well, aside from the disability groups that I am a member of, I have not had any other consultation. But this is all about choice for the individuals. If people do not wish to move to the new homes, if they are built, obviously they do not have to. It is totally unnecessary. Then we came to Deputy Morell, who gave an exceptional speech, and he was mentioning about the over 55s building sites, which obviously we voted in yesterday at St John's, but we didn't mention that they were going to be isolated in any sense. And he also mentioned that some people with disabilities can obviously receive abuse. That's unfortunately a part of life. And that may not be the case if they had a secure environment to live in. And allowing more people to lead independent lives. I think that's something that we would all vote for. Deputy Gardner, again, was talking about we are not deciding what is good for them. We are not, she wants to know why people would be placed there. We're not placing anybody there. Obviously, it would be up to them to choose. And she suggested that she would have brought an amendment to only allow 50% of disabled homes. Well, I can assure the Deputy that there is a demand, a great demand for, if these homes are built, there will be a great demand, and 100% is absolutely necessary. The bus is...
point of clarification.
Sorry, sir, no, not at the moment, no. She also mentioned buses for the disabled. Well, there is already a project underway.
There's a point of order now from Deputy Gardner. Point of order?
I stated in my speech that I don't know if it's 2050 and if it's in one or several developments. I didn't suggest that we need to specifically do this.
You've dressed up a point of clarification as a point of order. Yes, please, Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. Yes, she mentioned buses and the possibility of having too many disabled people getting on the buses. Obviously put on more buses, as Deputy Ward would say. But there is a project which is being progressed, which was raised at the Disability and Inclusion Advisory Group, to put all the small transportation vehicles that are available, try and collectively put them together and have a facility whereby people could phone up for this transport service and they would come straight to the door. So hopefully that will be in by the end of the year. Deputy Pamplin spoke about funding suitable accommodation, which is obviously not easy, and that is what we are trying to address here. And of course he mentioned that carers need greater support, which is something that we all understand, but of course it is very difficult to get staff at the moment, a problem which is affecting all sectors. Senator Ferguson mentioned about the Hampshire Hotel revamp, as did Senator Pallett, and the wonderful work they're doing, Maison Les Amis, and I believe they are looking for extra funding. I understand that they're short by a couple of £1 million to continue with the development, but hopefully that will be achievable. And of course, that will be solely for people with autism. So when people say that there's a degree of isolation, that is not necessarily the case, and it has been very well encouraged and very well received. Senator Mezek was not clear what it would achieve. Well, I would say that it would stop institutionalisation, which is something that we want to avoid. And there's no groundswell of support for this. I suppose once it's built, you will realise the level of support. But of course, that is dependent on data, which is something that I will go into later. He also mentioned that all homes should be fully accessible, which I absolutely agree with, and that's entirely right. But there is a good deal of cost there if you're adapting properties. The Deputy of St Twans started by talking about when people grow old, and obviously he mentioned a dementia village. That is, this site would certainly not prevent people from dementia living there, but I was hoping that, as I said previously, that it would be for younger people and people with families. He also mentioned that extra facilities are needed, which I think is something that we can all accept. The Constable of St Twans, I understand his objections, and it's very good that a constable not from our parish is concerned about overdevelopment in St Helier, which is obviously very, very useful. Unfortunately, he said he can't support me at this time. Then Senator Parrott gave a very emotive speech. Saying that this was full of the right intentions. I thank him for that. And Deputy Higgins said that this was something that is much needed. And let's make a stand for the disabled, sentiments which I completely concur with. And the Constable of St Martin's said that it was a wonderful, supportive community that could be created, and I do tend to agree with her. And finally, of course, my constable, who is doing his absolute best to protect agricultural fields from development. In the Minister's comments, he mentioned that there is insufficient data to know how many homes would be required for this purpose. There is a huge data gap locally when it comes to how many units would need to be built now to support the future needs of disabled children who would prefer to live at home, or whose families would want them to remain at home for as long as possible. There is likewise no publicly available data. Sorry, sir. There is likewise no publicly available data on how many disabled people in Jersey are living in institutional settings because of a lack of specialist housing. It is not for politicians to provide this information. Rather, if the provision of this housing must be dependent on a needs assessment, then it is for the government to order such an assessment. And for the purposes of this amendment, it should be assumed that any assessment undertaken will uncover a need for proportionate provision of housing. The Minister accepts that more needs to be done to understand the housing needs of disabled islanders. There are clearly three compelling reasons to set aside housing specifically for disabled people. Because the island-wide housing shortage acknowledged by the Island Plan will more severely impact people with disabilities. Because the needs of people with disabilities must and should be correctly prioritised by this government. And because the government has a responsibility to ensure equal access to housing and suitable social outcomes for people with disabilities as enshrined in the Bridging Island Plan. Sir, I maintain the amendment and call for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel and ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting.
So when the result is announced, can we have the votes for and against, please?
Yes, Deputy. And I can announce that the amendment has been adopted. 28 votes for and 10 votes contrary.
Those voting for in the chamber, Senator Farnham and Moore, the Conotubs of Grouville, St Peter, St Mary and St Martin, Deputies Lewis, Pinnell, St Martin, St Juan, Young, Morale, Guida, Lahegara and Ayer. And in the chat, Deputy Higgins, the Deputy of St John, Senator Pallett, the Conotub of St John, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Truscott, Senator Ferguson, Senator Gorst, Deputy Ash, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Labby, Deputy of Trinity. Those voting contrary in the chamber, Senator Mezek, the Conotub of St Helier, Deputy Southern, Tadier, St Mary, Ward and Gardner. And in the chat, the Conotub of St Brelard, Deputy Martin, the Conotub of St Saviour, and the Conotub of St One abstained.
Thank you, Gracia. The next amendment is the 16th, lodged by the Deputy of St Martin. I'll ask the Gracia to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25, insert the words except that. A. The following should be removed from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes in Policy H5, provision of affordable homes. 2. Field MN410, St Martin, 0.75 hectares and 4.2 verges. B. Within Policy H6, supported housing, after the words proposals for the development of supported homes including, there should be inserted the words age-restricted homes for people over 55. C. Within Policy H6, after the first paragraph, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. To support the provision of homes that help meet the needs of an ageing society, the following sites are specifically zoned for the provision of age-restricted over 55s homes, and their development for any other use will not be supported. 1. Field MN410, La Rue du But, St Martin, to provide retirement homes for rent and purchase to be administered by the Sir David Kirch Charitable Trust in conjunction with the parish of St Martin. D. The Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary, consequent upon the adoption of A, B and C. And E. The Draft Bridging Island Plan Proposals Map Part A, Planning Zones, should be amended to reflect the adoption of A, B and C.
Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And as members will see from their order paper, it is my intention to withdraw this amendment, but I just want to say a few words first. That may be why there's so few of us in the chamber at the moment, but I just want to say to members that Field 410 in St Martin has been a field that's been up for development for many decades now, but a more recent change of ownership has led to a new initiative to attempt to develop this field. Initially, we had plans for a parish-led retirement scheme on the site, but following the independent prospector's report and the Minister's initiative, it's now also being brought forward as a site for affordable homes. So, to be clear, St Martin's as a parish takes its responsibility for the whole of the island and to the whole of the island seriously. We want to do more for housing, we want to do our bit, and we want to do what's right. We can, if we move retirement homes to other sites, actually do both here, retirement and affordable. Sir, the parish has a clear and present need for retirement homes, but there's also a desperate need, as we know, for affordable family homes, homes for people to live in for their lives. We recognise that housing is probably, well, the most discussed subject amongst islanders at the moment, and we realise here that we have an opportunity, as I've just said, to do both. So I will, later in this debate, come back to the Assembly with an amendment for retirement homes, but in order to clear the way and provide some affordable homes in St Martin that are desperately needed, I now withdraw this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The next is the second amendment lodged by Deputy Lewis. I'll ask the Greffier to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25, insert the words except that. A. The following should be removed from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes at Policy H5, provision of affordable homes. 1. 10. Field S413, St Saviour, 0.70 hectares, 3.9 verges. 11. Field S415, St Saviour, 0.45 hectares, 2.5 verges. 14. Field S530, St Saviour, 0.80 hectares, 4.4 verges. 15. Field S729, St Saviour, 0.45 hectares, 2.5 verges. B. The Draft Island Plan 2022 to 2025 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary, consequent upon the adoption of paragraph A. And C. The Draft Bridging Island Plan Proposals Map, Part A, Planning Zones, should be amended to reflect the adoption of paragraph A.
Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the parish of St Saviour is already heavily built up
and suffers from increasing levels of traffic. With 11 schools in and around the parish, the morning rush hour is already causing bumper-to-bumper traffic, especially in the area around the Five Oaks roundabout. With a large development listed just north of the roundabout and the old St Saviour's Hospital due for redevelopment, in the not too distant future, this part of St Saviour will grind to a halt. Fields 470, S413, S415 and S415A, this site would be an extension to the La Sainte-Chaine estate. The area to the west of the site is, west of the site of the old Jersey Evening Post building is already being redeveloped. On the main road, this would lead south to the overloaded Five Oaks roundabout. On top of this, we have La Sainte-Chaine being redeveloped in the not too distant future, and there's no mention of this in the Bridging Island plan. And this is all within 1 square mile of the fields highlighted for development. I'm not just being NIMBY, sir. I know we need more housing for first-time buyers, but just leave us field S413 and S415 undeveloped on this site. Using all the fields here would still produce 68 to 102 houses. St Saviour's Hospital in the future will also provide another 200 homes, again not covered in the plan. Fields S530, 530 behind Le Clos Pommel, this field should be removed altogether from the schedule for affordable housing. It represents a green lung in St Saviour with a single track access which exits onto Prince's Tower Road to the Five Oaks roundabout. Both field and valley have historic importance to the green infrastructure of the area. The amendment can be seen on map 2 and map 4. The site is listed as providing between 60 to 90 houses. The proposed access would be down a narrow lane which would be intolerable for residents and would destroy this unique field and valley. There is a brook, sir, that runs through this meadow towards Swiss Valley, which in turn runs all the way down to the rear of Longville Manor. This field, S530, must be preserved as a valuable branch of Swiss Valley. I'll just do a few illustrations, sir. I was mentioned there's a single track access to Prince's Tower Road and to the Five Oaks roundabout. The access on the right, looking east of the lamppost, during the morning peak traffic queues build up to a point past the access to St Michael's School where drop-offs add to the congestion. The additional traffic movements arising from a further 45 plus family dwellings would simply worsen an already unacceptable situation in the area. On potentially exiting this particular site, sir, and turning left towards the Five Oaks roundabout, I did send members an email earlier on with maps and pictures of the area. If one goes as far as the crossing on the left, there is insufficient room for anyone to pass, and there's no room to put in additional pavements. There is a small paved area there. In fact, if members would touch their thumbs together and spray their hands, that would be the width of the pavement in the area. I have mentioned this to the Environment Minister, who says he may be able to find alternate routes. But people are like water, they'll find the shortest route to wherever they are going. Also, if one approaches the Five Oaks roundabout on Bagatelle Road, directly to the left there are 4 cottages plus one further down, and we've had to install what we call orcas in the area. Orcas are a thick slab of rubber painted black and white which deflect the vehicles
from taking away the drain pipes from the buildings as they pass. There's nowhere to go and we can't widen the road anymore. So I ask members to reject the 2 sites for affordable housing to prevent St Saviour from developing into an unsustainable manner. It shall also be noted that the development of affordable housing on these sites without the necessary infrastructure to provide safe travel for children to school would cause road safety issues and further difficulties for all children accessing the school in the area. My Department of Infrastructure have been working with the parish of St Saviour to provide as many safer routes to school as we can, but are being hampered by overpopulation and traffic. St Saviour's has taken the brunt of much of the island's housing in recent years. For the last 10 years, I have been maintaining the clock and chiming bells of St Saviour's Church. From the top of the tower, I always take 5 minutes out to admire the wonderful view over the parish. And it never ceases to shock me to look out at the parish and see the building and infilling that has taken place and to see all the fields that have disappeared. There have been so much infilling of late that many people do not know where St Helier ends and St Saviour begins. If the good people of Jersey have the new telephone directory handy, 2122, the map on pages 73 and 75 has most of the parish of St Saviour with St Helier stamped on it in big black letters right across it. Even the planning department are referring to it now as Greater St Helier. Not whilst I'm still a member, sir. Sir, I make the amendment and look forward to members' comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? If no member wishes to speak on the amendment, yes, Deputy Pamplin.
Oh, thank you, sir. I thought I'd get in to support my fellow deputy. A bit of an echo here. I'll just turn down my speaker just in case, but that seems to be better. Yes, sir. So, no surprise, a St Saviour deputy getting up to talk and support his fellow deputy in this proposition, this amendment. And so far, of course, we've heard a great deal of other parts of the island. St Brelard for a few days, St John, and now St Helier, and now St Saviour. The peril, I guess, of doing the process this way. However, this is really important because, as the deputy just said, there can be no doubt whatsoever that St Saviour have helped the island so much over time with providing all sorts of accommodation. And of course, we could always do more, and we would always try and do more. But anybody who travels to any one of the schools, the private schools, the secondary schools, the colleges, or even comes into work, goes through some of the main arteries of this island, and that is into St Saviour. We all know the roads I'm talking about here, and especially, as the deputy alludes to, Five Oaks. The island, as well as increasing and helping and supporting the island needs in terms of housing, houses the island's colleges, secondary schools, and primary schools. And I want to particularly focus on primary schools, because this is an issue, and I'm sure our constable will talk about it again, but we have a problem with, as everybody else, but especially in our parish, with the burden of providing school spaces for families in the parish. But equally, some of the primary schools in our parish have some of the most dangerous roads right outside of them. I'm thinking of three particularly in the district that I represent currently, before we all support in the next election for the entire parish, but particularly in my district. I'm thinking about St Luke's, thinking about Clackdewey. Equally, the St Saviour primary school just up the road closer to Five Oaks. I went on a walk with some of the teachers and some of the parents and did the morning walk to school one morning. And we did it from both ends. And seeing the amount of traffic flow come through and cars coming up Laverine on that crossroad, I'm sure we've all been there at some stage. And you're seeing young families having to step onto the road and having to really hike into the other side of the road. We're seeing that down in St Luke's as well and other parts of the island. I know other primary schools across the island probably have the same problem. This is an issue, and I don't want it to become a parish versus parish issue, but we cannot deny it, that this part of the island has taken more than its fair share. I do worry about quality of life for people in the area. The Saint-Chen is due to be expanded. We see the work that's going on in the former newspaper site as well. It's an ever-growing and populated area. But I think this particular, and the Deputy spoke really well about the green lungs in the parish. We hear a lot about this in St Helier as well. But this issue that is creeping out about St Saviour being greater St Helier is concerning, because all I've heard over the last 4 years, being a privileged member of this assembly, is everybody worried about the loss of parish identity, the loss of the parish through, when we go back a couple of years, we're debating elections and the loss of constables. We're all talking about the concern of, well, when I start to read and hear these things about St Saviour being greater St Helier, there are great neighbours, and obviously they're very urban, very populated. But this is one of this moment as an assembly. We can see the issues growing here. We have to make tough choices. I have been making tough choices. You will see with my voting record. But I think the obvious answer is right here in front of us. I look forward, as ever, to hearing the Environment Minister, who so far, I give him a lot of credit for doing this. It cannot be easy. But I think I really hope members will support us in this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conotar of St Saviour.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. This is very sad, and I do hope that most of the members in the Assembly will support the parish of St Saviour's and allow these fields to be withdrawn. St Saviour's is a saturation point. We have nearly all the schools, so the traffic is so heavy at times that the parishioners can't even open their windows because of the exhaust fumes. They are the ones, my ratepayers, who are paying to keep the parish in good order. Let me start with field 530 and 530A. It's a beautiful meadow. If you pass there now, you'll see there are cows grazing in it. There are bales of silage which have been made, and they are stored in the field. I was talking to people who live and overlook it, and they've had some potatoes growing in it. It's absolutely fabulous. The entrance to the field is very, very narrow. And there is rumours that this field is obviously going to have to be filled in to make it okay to build on. So the people who are already established in this house, in these houses at the top runs down, are going to have lorries tumbling up and down, throwing waste in, heaven knows what. And they're going to have the houses covered in the dust. And again, people the other side are going to have their houses covered in dust. It's totally unnecessary. This is an absolutely wonderful meadow. It's got all sorts in it. It's got the stream, as we've already heard. It's got a lot of diversity in it and lots of animals and bits and pieces. I have spoken to a family member, and although the people are wanting to sell, they quite understand that there would be difficulties in building, and I think they've been thinking again about having it all filled in. You don't fill in a beautiful meadow like there is there. So I would like the Assembly to think very, very hard about this. And like you've already heard, when you come out of that road, you're going to go to the left-hand side out of Welton Farm that was, and you're going to hit the roundabout and the Morrison supermarket. Now I know there are other supermarkets, and you're going to be in a bit of a quandary. So I would think, please, I reiterate that it's a beautiful green lung. It's what everything is needed. It's built up in St Saviour's because we need land. And once land is gone, it is gone. It's cemented and concreted over, and you don't get it back. Field 415, I know the owner is not willing to sell because it's a member of my family. And Hall 70, the original owner was willing to sell, but has since passed away, and I would think that the family who live away and maybe have inherited it will be willing to sell. But again, you have someone who doesn't live in the parish. These two fields, and if you want to know where they are, and you haven't been round on the site, opposite where the co-op is being built, and there are other supermarkets, opposite the other where it's being built, there are two beautiful fields which actually have just been ploughed, and they look absolutely fantastic. These are the two fields in question, and the Jersey Royal grow potatoes in them. And at the end of last season, they grew wildflowers. And if you passed there, the butterflies that were on that field were absolutely incredible. And the wildlife and the diversity there was fabulous. And it just showed that the farmers were being very, very sensitive. They weren't just extracting everything from the land and putting nothing back. So these two fields are very, very important. And so they are good agricultural ground. We have 3 farmers in St Saviour's, 3 dairy farmers. I'm one of them. These fields are nothing to do with me. I don't rent these fields. They're rented by the other 2 farmers. But to take these away for homes would be absolutely dreadful. But not only that, because they're agricultural land, it would head us towards Moffron. And we've got a lot of building in between time, so then when we get to Moffron, we'd be built up, and then you've got beyond Moffron, and then we're almost in St Martin. And I really think that, these fields need to be saved. If they were derelict, I would be the first one to say, no, let them go, because we need accommodation for everybody. I have an amendment for one of the fields to say that I'm prepared to allow and go with the flow and say yes if it was for first-time buyers. But if it's not for first-time buyers, I will stop. But to be honest with you, sir, I think we have enough in my parish. You've already heard that there's all sorts in the plans for St Saviour's Hospital. And when Senator Messick was Housing Minister, he and I had conversations, and he was very good. He came to speak to me. And I said, I can understand that that's going to have to be built on. It's been derelict for so long. And I still think it was the best place for the hospital, but then I digress. You're going to have a pincer feeling, because that's going to be coming through. And you're going to have bits and pieces there. Now, I did say to Senator Messick, if you've got to build on there, fine. But you must put everything that is needed in that area there. You need a primary school. You're going to need some shops. Because we don't want people to be gravitating down to 5 Oaks. Because the idea is to try and keep everybody up in that corner unless they really need. Senior schools is totally different. But a primary school would be ideal there. There's not a mention of any schools of any of the fields anywhere on this island that are in this island plan. And I just, that beggars belief where you can put houses and people and families and not even consider having a school. But that's where we are and think, but as I say, St Saviour's Hospital will have to be built on, that's quite obvious. It won't be in my time because I'm stepping down. But I do feel that the people who live in that area need to have some sort of support. And it's not fair with what's being. In fact, I have to be honest, sir, and I don't think this is parliamentary language in the end, but I was very upset when I heard that St Clements was full, so they didn't have to be in on the plan. And I made my staff laugh here because I said, I'd like to know who I can sleep with to get St Saviour's off the plan. Because we've had enough, sir. Sorry, I can see you smiling, and I know it wasn't parliamentary language, but we have enough. St Saviour's is saturated. We are full to the brim. The people who live here need a quality of life. The school has St Saviour's has 15 to 16 schools. The over 50s guys, we have 209 homes for the over 55s. This surprised me when I asked my staff. Housing estates, we have 66. So, to be honest with you, sir, and to the Assembly, I think St Saviour's has done enough to help here. And I think that if I could ask all of you to please seriously think and let us get away with something this time round, please. Thank you, sir.
Clarification, please.
Yes, Conatard.
Yes.
Point of
Yes, sir.
clarification.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you very
Before we
much.
get back to Conatard, your language was unparliamentary in that
Yes.
respect, and I think that should be withdrawn.
I apologise. I apologise, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Minister.
The Conitab mentioned that under Field 5 S530, Prince's Tower Road,
Yes.
that is the field south of Five Oaks. The other one's
Yes.
to the north.
The other side, yeah.
The Conitab mentioned that there are cows in that field.
Yes.
So could the Conitab definitely confirm that they were in 530 and not in fields 528, which is immediately on the northern fringe of that field, where it's definitely grazed by cows? Could the Conitab confirm? I could go on more, but could she confirm that she's got that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, I went day before yesterday with my foreman. No, I'm lying. Sorry. I went before we started this. I went last week, and there were there were bales of silage.
Okay. Could I just check?
Sorry, keep going. Yes.
Obviously, the site visit where the members went on Friday, were they there then?
I didn't go to the site visit, sir.
Okay,
I
thank you.
had my own farm to run.
Okay, and the other thing, so I
Yes.
think I probably, okay, thank you, sir. I've got the confirmation.
All right.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatard.
Thank you. And I apologise.
Thank you, Conatard. Conatard St One.
Thank you, sir. I have stopped gently chuckling after the Constable of St Saviour's unparliamentary remark, but we'll skip that. So I want to speak in support of the Constable of St Saviour's, and some members might be surprised because I've been consistently supporting the development of first-time buyer homes. But as I've said before, St Saviour's and St Helier, to be blunt, have taken more than their fair share of development, and frankly, in my view, fall very firmly into the same camp as St Clement's. And I think if we are going to build first-time buyer houses, then we should look elsewhere rather than try and cram it all into 3 sites. Because at the end of the day, we will end up with 3 parishes that are completely concreted over, and will become less desirable for people to live in. Every parish needs to have green lung. Every parish needs to have green spaces for people to walk through, and not necessarily have to use their cars to get to them. And I think the Constable of St Saviour's and the Deputy Lewis took very good points in this respect. So reluctantly, because I really do not like to lose first-time buyer homes, we've lost an awful lot in the course of this debate, considerably more than I feel it should have happened, and it is getting to the stage where this plan is becoming unsupportable because we've lost so many first-time buyer homes. But in this instance, I very reluctantly entirely agree with the Constable of St Saviour's and indeed Deputy Lewis, and will therefore be supporting them in this matter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatard. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Keeder.
So I will, uncharacteristically, I will have to not follow my minister for this particular amendment. And there's a special reason. I've emailed all the members about one aspect that was quite overlooked in all this Bridging Island plan, which is ecology and biodiversity. And especially in the site selection, one of the primary concerns, and it's been talked about at length in this assembly, one of the primary concerns was how suitable land was for agriculture. And interestingly, it's inversely proportional to how suitable land is for biodiversity and ecology in general. I'd like to speak especially about field S530, and it's been published on the chat channel in Teams, so members can have a look at it, or they can look it up on the internet or on the island plan. But this is a perfect example of a field which is absolutely unsuitable for agriculture unless you're trying to grow rice, but really, really good for biodiversity. And indeed, it is quite essential that we keep some of those. We are not going to have farmers fighting for them because they are of very little use to them, but which are absolutely essential to the wildlife that we have in the island. It doesn't matter that there are gardens around. It doesn't matter that there are a few trees papered around. Once in a while, you need land that is undisturbed and left to itself. And it doesn't look good. It looks messy, it looks full of brambles, it looks full of unidentifiable plants, but that is biodiversity, and that is something that is absolutely essential to the ecosystem of the island. So, as I've requested in my letter, I hope that members will think about that when they look at fields. There's another one, there's another very important one. I don't think, unfortunately, it will be debated individually, but J1109 is absolutely essential to a maternity roost of grey long-eared bats. And basically, if that field was built, we would lose the roost, and that's about 1/3 of the population of bats, of grey long-eared bats in the island. Those are extremely, extremely rare in the UK, and people actually come from the UK to Jersey to see them. So, yes, in this particular case, field S530 is one of the really important fields in St. Saviour for biodiversity, and I hope that you will take that into account. Thank you, sir.
Point of clarification, please.
Point of clarification. Will you give clarification if asked, Deputy Gida? Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Gida. It was just, I'm actually on the Deputy's comment about J1109. I really wish that had been mentioned before, because J1109, I believe, was allocated for housing in the Minister's consolidated amendment at the beginning of this debate. And that would certainly have changed my views on that. Thank you, sir. That information. Do you realise that that has already been...
Absolutely. I tried to pick up the point where it was discussed, where it was debated, but I didn't find it. I think the field was accepted without a debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does any other member to speak? Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think I'd like to follow the ecological line, because I absolutely agree with Deputy Gida on the importance of biodiversity. But somehow that doesn't quite match with the arguments on the agricultural value we heard earlier, these fields. When I first visited these fields, they were fallow. They were very, very overgrown. It's a sloping, this is S530, which is very overgrown and sloping. Absolutely no sign of any agriculture, past and present. Now also, when I visited recently, I saw no cows. I accept the fact that the cows could be put on there sort of yesterday. I've no idea. But I know when the site visit took place on Friday, the members reported to me and the officers that there were no cows there. So that's one thing. And of course, the cows are to the further north in S528. And of course, the bales of hay, I think that I'm not sure that sits with the biodiversity if they are unspoilt, as I've seen. You know, when you start taking a hay cut, I think you start to manage the field, and I didn't certainly see any signs. So obviously, that issue can't be resolved, but I would personally question that particular part of it, the agricultural value. And in fact, the JFEU say that this S530 is less important to agriculture. So I think if we are going to dismiss these fields, that at least we should be clear on them and what the reasons we're doing so. So I'm not going to argue against biodiversity. I bow to Deputy Gida's knowledge if there is an in-depth assessment. I'm aware the mention was made of J1109. When I researched into that report, like all other members, I saw that report of impact on biodiversity. In particular, mention was made of bats. The information that reached me was that the bats are located in the Methodist Church, which is to the north of that, which is something which they obviously, in designing that conversion to residences and the former Methodist chapel at Sion, have accommodated the bats, and that's wonderful news. And so, of course, in any development, one can establish one can establish the landscaping, one can retain natural features. There's a lot of things that can be done to mitigate. But Deputy Keeler is right. It will be mitigation. You know, the best biodiversity is to leave it alone. So I think just dealing with that. Picking up the, so what we've got is we've got two, there's no question, very, very significant agricultural fields immediately north of St. Shen's, which is 413 and 415. And we've got a field which I personally don't consider, none of the evidence available to me is in agriculture or has been. So we got the two. And of course the third element of the proposition has already gone anyway. That is S729, because that fell away, that I agreed to accept that coming out in Amendment 91, which we've dealt with. And of course, these fields, I mean, why did these approach come out? Now, I think members have already made their feelings known about development close to the urban area, so I accept that. So what I'm trying to do is articulate the arguments for them going around the urban areas. And so, rather like the Conitar, well, I shall maintain that. They were first proposed in April last year. They've been through very lengthy procedures, and it is absolutely right. There has been objections, particularly to field S30 at Princess Tower Road, that when obviously the residents around that area are very, very, make their views very plain, as if one goes on the site, one is immediately approached and had that drawn to your attention. But nonetheless, the owner did put them forward, and they did come forward as being one of the ones which were suitable for housing. So that's why they've come through. And of course, the planning inspectors considered all the arguments. This wasn't one in one of these Johnny-come-lately sites, as members have said. This has always been there. But I'm absolutely not going to argue against at all this issue about the whole amount of development that's happening and may happen in the Five Oaks area. It absolutely needs what we are seeking to do in other parts of the island, which I've lodged a late amendment, which members have not yet obviously had a chance to even agree, and it gets discussed. And my intention is to maintain that, whether or not these fields get zoned or not. Because the Deputy Lewis has showed me the pictures of the traffic network in the area. There's no pavements. And of course that immediately is an issue that arises about S530. That if the one develops into housing, children need to be able to get to St Saviour's School. They do not need to walk round the dangerous road, the main road. There needs to be a pedestrian access. There needs to be a decent pedestrian access for people to walk across to St Saviour's Road. Now, that at the moment doesn't exist, but if it does get developed, it will be for the developer and the owner, because it will be locked in via a planning obligation agreement to require them to do so. And they'll probably have to buy some land. They'll probably have to negotiate some agreements. But unless they do that, that would never, ever get developed. We can't have that without proper access, that field. So, that's why sometimes these fields take 10 years to happen. I hope it doesn't if it gets zoned. Now, the master plan, obviously, we've already got, whatever happens, we've got a major development going on the Five Oaks site. What's happened there is we've got they're creating this kind of, I'm not quite sure they call it a supermarket or what sort of market it is, and they've got these industrial units there. So all that's going on. And of course, what are Andium going to do with St Shen? Well, I'm told, I haven't seen the scheme, but it's going to be major intensification there. Major intensification. Now, I don't know what Andium's intentions are. Housing Minister might be able to tell us. But I thought that St Shen is principally, in fact, probably not, it's wholly social rented estate, I think. So now, what I'm a bit puzzled about is that later on we've got another amendment from the Conitar, Amendment 21, that says on fields, I've got to find which one, 415A and 470, we should have first-time buyer homes. So I'm really puzzled. What are we saying? Don't develop these fields at all, or what? I mean, so I'm really having difficulty. Maybe I think if the Deputy Lewis could, Deputy Lewis, if Deputy Lewis, when he comes back and is summing up, can explain that. But it seems to be quite a valid question. We seems to have got, because it seems to me that if the Conitab is saying, let's have first-time buyers, I can see why that might help make more a balanced community with a very large social rented estate to the south, and then immediately to the north, some first-time buyer homes. And of course, these two fields back right up to green fields. Now, I really don't know, what the future is. That I'll bow to my minister colleagues as to what is likely to go on there. So this whole area is going to see a lot of activity. And then what might happen? I don't know. We've got the whole Norman site. We've got all that industrial area. What is likely to happen there? We've got Terrible Junction. Now, what I'm proposing to bring, even whatever, it's not dependent on these being zoned, is a master plan. And that means it puts it on the same category as the work we're going to do for St Bullards, because I asked the question to my officers, why are we having a master plan for the West? Why isn't this area have it? Traffic, we've got to look at traffic, we've got to look at road links, we've got to look at buses. And this isn't a question of let's have some bus shelters. This is about do it properly, because we need to find ways in which that area we can manage and do better. And that should make the needs for public open space and community facilities in that area. And it may well be that as part of that master plan, because if these are zoned, then these would feature in a master plan, we would have lots of public open space within these sites. But if we close the door to anything that happens now, then I think that just rules it out. So I feel that I absolutely agree with the Constable and the Deputy that there really needs to be greater recognition of how we improve and try and make the urban environment better. But in the end, of course, it comes down to homes. This is the reason why these are featured in the list of affordable homes. Is because it's on the edge of right on the edge of the existing built area. We need homes. People work in the built area. We have transport links with all those things, and that is why the proposal came through the island plan to put it there. But obviously, I think members please make that judgment. I don't think in the case of S530, I don't think it's on agricultural. I think it's about impact on the neighbourhood and the traffic issues, pedestrian issues, and the points Deputy Gida issued. It's not an agricultural issue. On the other two, it is. But equally, you've got to think about what goes on next door with St Shen, because I think there's going to be major intensification there, major. And so I think we need to look at that whole area. So, but in the end, as Minister, I'm in the hands of the Assembly, and those are the factors that I ask members, ask you to weigh in your decision before you press the button. Thank you.
Sir, apologies. A point of clarification, if you don't mind, I do apologise.
Will you accept this, Minister?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Yes, Morel.
Sorry, yes, and it's probably because I missed a part of the debate. The Minister said that St Shen there's going to be major intensification there. I was just wondering if you could clarify what that intensification is. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I apologise. I'm not the housing minister, and I'm not involved with Andium. I'm not allowed anywhere near them because they're the developer and I'm the regulator. So I can't tell you. But all my officers tell you there's going to be a big intensification there. Which I think means a lot more people.
Could I help with that, sir?
No, sorry.
All right.
I'm sure you'd be delighted to do so, but understanding orders, you can't.
Thank you.
Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other members to speak, I call upon Deputy Lewis to reply. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to thank all members that have spoken. I'd like to thank Deputy Pamplin for his support I'd like to thank the Constable of St Saviour, who put everything in a nutshell. We have a wonderful meadow there with a little brook running down through it. Why anybody would want to fill that in and build houses on it is totally beyond me. As I say, it forms the top end of Swiss Valley, which runs all the way down to Longville Manor, which is more or less not quite the length of the parish, but very close. It's a wonderful meadow, and S530 really needs to be preserved. And just to avoid any confusion, to the north of Le Grand Rue de Saint-Martin, there were 4 fields, and basically being pragmatic, because we want young people in the parish too, we have young people in the parish who would like houses, there's 4 fields, and basically what I've said is if the Environment Minister could reduce that to two fields, then that's more manageable. It's something we can cope with. Directly opposite on the old JP site, there's development there. There's going to be, I believe, a supermarket there, and as a planning obligation, we could put in a proper crossing there to make sure everybody is safe. But as I say, regarding field 530, that is just something that needs to be preserved at all costs. And regarding the other fields to the north, the ones we want to keep, I've had parishioners sending me videos which will probably please Deputy Gita of some quite rare butterflies up there, which would be really nice. But as I say, I'm in the hands of members. I'm happy to take it in 2 bites if you're in agreement, sir, or I can take them all together. I'm in the hands of members.
Well, it's a matter for you, Deputy. But by 2 bites, do you mean A Roman 1 and A Roman 2? So A Roman 1 would be fields 413 and 415, and A Roman 2 would be field 530.
Indeed, sir. Thank you.
Yes, well, that's in order.
Make the proposition, sir, and ask for the appel.
So the appel has been called for, yes, in 2 parts, and the members are first considering A Roman 1, which relates to removing fields 413, so S413 and S415 from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via Teams are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. Former members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment has been adopted, 20 votes for and 16 votes contra. Yes.
Those voting for in the chamber, Senator Mezek, the Conatubs of St Lawrence, Greville, St Peter and St Martin, Deputies Southern, Lewis, Pinnell, St Mary, Morrell, the Hegera, Ayer, Ward and Gardner. And in the chat, those voting for, Senator Ferguson, the Conatub of St Brallard, the Conatub of St Saviour, Deputy Pamplin, the Deputy of Trinity. Oh, there was two. And the Conatub of St Juan. Those voting contra in the chamber, Senator Farnham and Moore, the Conatub of St Mary, Deputies of St Martin and St Juan, Deputy Young and Deputy Guida. And in the chat, the Conatub of St John, Senator Pallett, Senator Gorst, Deputy Martin, the Deputy of Greville, Deputy Truscott, the Deputy of St John, and Deputy Labby. Sorry, and Deputy Wickenden.
We now move to the second part of the vote, which is in respect of A Roman 2, Field 530. S530, and I invite members to cast their votes either in the chat channel or in the usual way for members in the chamber. Four members are guilty of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that A Roman 2 has been adopted, 28 votes for and 10 votes contra. Deputy Lewis, do you now propose B and C of your amendment? All the lights have gone. Oh. Thank you very much. I ask the greffier, ask members to cast their votes. Those via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber in respect of subparagraphs B and C of this amendment. 4 members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that parts B and C of the amendment have been adopted. 30 votes pour and 4 votes contre.
Could we have a full, please, sir?
Yes.
Those voting conch, the Conotub of St Mary. Deputy Wickenden, the Senator Pallett, and Senator Gorst.
Thank you.
May I thank members for their support, sir.
Sir, can I raise a point of order, please?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if you could rule either now before the adjournment what effect that decision has on Amendment 29, which is due to follow not immediately but a little while later on Field 415A, sir. And the other point to say an apology to members, but I do have to leave promptly at 5:30 tonight, and I see we're just coming up to 5:10, and we're just about to start another field. And so, sir, I just want to make that plain that I will have to leave, and I'll leave it open to members if any member thinks we should adjourn early. No, I think.
Could I?
Thank you, sir.
Could I say, sir, that being as both fields have been accepted that they're not going to be built on, I would like to withdraw my proposition, sir. Is that possible or not?
You want to withdraw the 29th Amendment?
Yes, sir.
You're entitled to withdraw your amendment if you wish to do so, yes.
And then there's no confusion, it will just fall away and the fields stay as they are. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Does that answer your question,
Thank you, sir.
Minister? Presumably it does.
Thank you for the clarification.
So
Yeah.
may I I'm just wondering, sir, it seems unlikely that we could start a debate and finish it, and it has been a long week, sir, so I would like to test the mood of the Assembly and propose the adjournment.
Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Seconded. Anyone wish to speak on that? Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. It has been a very long week, but next week is going to be even longer. I think we should be using the 22 minutes left to best effect. Thank you.
Yes. Unless anyone wishes to speak, which they're absolutely entitled to, on this matter, we can go straight to the vote. Deputy Panner, do you really want to speak on this? It's a matter for you.
Yes, very quickly, sir. Right. Is it possible, before we make this decision very quickly, to have a state of play of where we are in proceedings? Thank you.
I think that's quite complicated. Because
and there's still quite a long way to go, sir.
Different ideas of how far we've got, I think. Might be 50 answers to that question. The Minister might give us an update on Monday morning. The appel has been called for. The proposition is in relation to adjourning now or carrying on. And I invite members who wish to adjourn now to vote pour in the chat channel or in the chamber in the usual way, or contra if they want to press on to 5:30.
So by the time we do all this, we've passed the time anyway.
Well, that's why we're trying to do it quickly. It's going to be quite close. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. the proposition that the Assembly adjourned, there were 19 votes for and 18 votes contra. So the proposition succeeded. So the unless any other member wishes to raise anything else, the Assembly will be adjourned now until 9:30 on Monday morning.